The fire should have ended it. The studio, the tapes, Melancholy Mountain, all of it reduced to ash. But as Emma and Jake struggled to move on, the nightmares began. The floor crawler wasn't gone. It was waiting. Emma hadn't slept in days. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the burning studio, watching the creature twist and convulse in the flames. But it never disappeared. It always turned its head, locked its hollow black eyes onto her, and whispered her name. Jake wasn't doing any better. He had checked into a cheap motel hours away from town, but distance didn't seem to matter. The floor crawler had followed him. The scratches on the floor returned. The shadows in the corners deepened, and now his reflection in the motel mirror didn't always move when he did. They thought destroying the show would end this nightmare. But the floor crawler had never needed the show. It only needed them. One night, Emma's phone rang. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Emma!" a voice rasped. Her stomach clenched. "Who is this? Where's Jake?" A chill crawled up her spine. "Who is this?" A long pause, then, barely above a whisper, "I see you." Emma's heart pounded as she looked around her dark apartment. Nothing. No movement, no shadows shifting where they shouldn't. But something felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy. The silence itself seemed to breathe. Then the scratching began. Slow, deliberate, like nails dragging along wood. Her breath caught as she turned toward her bedroom door. The sound was coming from inside. She grabbed her car keys and bolted. She had to find Jake. He had been right. This thing wasn't just a show, wasn't just a memory. It was something far worse. She drove through the night, headlights cutting through the fog as she made her way to the rundown motel where Jake was staying. By the time she arrived, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting eerie shadows across the empty parking lot. She knocked hard on Jake's door. "Jake, open up!" Silence. She pounded again. "Jake!" A weak, shuffling noise came from inside. Then the door creaked open just enough for her to see him. He looked terrible, pale, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept in weeks. His hands trembled as he pulled her inside, locking the door behind them. "They're watching," he muttered, pulling the curtains shut. Emma swallowed hard. "Who?" Jake turned, his eyes wild. "The floor crawler isn't alone." Jake led her to the motel bathroom and pointed at the mirror. At first, Emma saw nothing but their reflections, but as she stared, the image in the glass twitched. Not them. Something else. Figures stood behind their reflections, distorted, shadowy things with two wide grins. They loomed just behind Emma and Jake, though when she turned, the room was empty. Jake whispered, "They're in the glass." Emma's stomach twisted. "We have to get out of here." Jake shook his head. "Nowhere's safe. Every screen, every reflection, anywhere it can see us, it can reach us." Emma's breath caught as she stared at her reflection. One of the shadowy figures stepped closer, its grin widening, its head tilting unnaturally to the side. Then, without warning, it moved outside the glass. Emma screamed as the thing lunged forward, its body stretching out of the mirror like melting wax. Jake grabbed her wrist and yanked her back just as the creature's fingers scraped across her arm, leaving behind deep, burning welts. Jake grabbed a lamp and smashed the mirror. The creature shrieked before vanishing into the shards. Panting, Emma clutched her arm. "It's getting stronger." Jake nodded grimly. "And we're running out of time." They barely had a moment to recover before the motel TV flickered on. Static buzzed through the room, and a distorted, low voice whispered, "You can't run." The screen showed a dark, empty hallway, one Emma and Jake didn't recognize. But then something moved. A shadow unfurled from the darkness, crawling on all fours, its head twitching at an unnatural angle. It was coming. Jake didn't hesitate. He grabbed Emma's hand and yanked her toward the door. They sprinted outside, barely stopping to grab their bags. The moment they reached Emma's car, the motel room lights flickered violently. Inside, the shadows twisted and convulsed, forming grotesque shapes that pressed against the glass. Jake slammed the passenger door shut. "Drive!" Emma didn't need to be told twice. She tore out of the parking lot, tires screeching against the pavement. In the rearview mirror, she saw the motel windows shatter as inky darkness poured out like a living thing, writhing, hungry. They didn't stop driving until they reached the highway, where the morning sun finally began to break over the horizon. Only then did Emma loosen her death grip on the steering wheel. Jake exhaled, rubbing a shaking hand down his face. "We need to end this." Emma nodded, eyes locked on the road. "How?" He hesitated. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, "We need to go back." Emma's stomach dropped. "Back where?" Jake swallowed hard. "To where it all began." The floor crawler wasn't just a monster from a forgotten show. It was something else, something that had always existed, waiting for the right moment to step through. The destruction of the show hadn't killed it. It had freed it. Now it was using their memories, their reflections, their screens, anything it could to get closer. Emma and Jake had no choice. If they wanted to survive, they had to find a way to stop it once and for all. Before there was nothing left of them to save. Subscribe for more stories that will keep you up at night.